In the sprawling tapestry of American industry, few names once commanded the respect and reach of Fairbanks-Morse, a company that revolutionized global commerce with a simple platform, that powered a world war with massive diesel engines, that built locomotives for a nation's rails, then vanished from the public eye. How does a giant like that disappear? And more importantly, did it ever really fall? 1823, St. Johnsbury, Vermont. A 27-year-old inventor named Thaddeus Fairbanks leased his cousin's ironworks. The plan was simple enough: manufacture plows, build stoves, make a living in the Green Mountains doing what blacksmiths had done for generations. Thaddeus wasn't content with simple. He'd grown up watching his father's hemp business, observing the daily frustration of commerce in the early 1800s. Every transaction involving heavy goods required the same maddening process. To weigh a wagon load of hemp, you had to unload it, piece by piece, bale by bale, transfer everything to a steelyard balance, get your measurement, then load it all back up again. Hours of labor. For a single number, Thaddeus saw the problem clearly. The weighing tools of his era were designed for an older world. Small goods, market stalls. But America was expanding. Railroads were coming, factories were rising, and nobody had figured out how to weigh the new industrial age. So he invented it. 1831, the platform scale patent. The genius wasn't in complexity. It was in elegant simplicity. Instead of moving the load to the scale, you put the scale under the load. A platform, lever arms beneath, counterweights that balance the mass without ever touching it. Drive your wagon onto the platform, get your weight, drive off. Done. No unloading. No wasted hours, no back-breaking transfer of cargo. The platform scale let commerce move at the speed industry demanded. His brother Joseph understood what Thaddeus had created, not just a tool, a foundation. Joseph took the patent and did what inventors often can't. He marketed it, sold it, made people see that this simple platform was about to change everything. 1833, E&T Fairbanks & Company Incorporated. The scale that would build an empire had arrived, and the world was about to get a lot heavier. Charles Hosmer Morse was 17 years old when he started working for Fairbanks, $50 a year plus room and board. The 1850s version of an entry-level job. Nobody expected him to become the engine of global expansion. But here's what most people miss about Fairbanks-Morse. The invention alone wasn't enough. Thaddeus built the scale. Joseph marketed it in New England. But it took someone with Morse's hunger to turn a Vermont ironworks into an international giant. The platform scale was spreading fast. 1830s, Fairbanks opened offices in New York and Boston. Merchants needed scales. Factories needed scales. Railroads needed scales. Every expansion of American commerce created demand for accurate weighing. Therefore, the company grew. But Morse saw something bigger. He saw that America's industrial boom was just the beginning. If scales could revolutionize trade in Boston, why not Shanghai? 1846, Fairbanks opened an office in China. 1848, Cuba. From a small Vermont shop, Fairbanks-Morse became a global name in just 3 decades. By 1860, the company employed over 1,000 people. The annual payroll hit $90,000. Not massive by modern standards, but for a business built on weighing hemp, staggering. Morse kept pushing. After the Civil War, he opened offices in Cincinnati, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Indianapolis. Every major hub of American industry got a Fairbanks presence, and Morse made partner. His name joined the company, Fairbanks, Morse and Company. The scales themselves were evolving too. No longer just platform designs for wagons. Fairbanks built weighlocks that could handle 200 to 250 tons. Industrial beasts for an industrial age. By 1868, production hit 4,000 scales per month. Annual production value exceeded $500,000. In today's money, over 6 million. 150,000 scales total, shipped worldwide. But Morse wasn't satisfied with scales. The 1880s brought a new acquisition, the Eclipse Wind Engine Company. Windmills, water pumps, friction clutch improvements for farms across the Midwest. Beloit, Wisconsin became Fairbanks-Morse territory. Diversification. That was the key. Scales built the empire, but engines Engines would define the next chapter. And Morse knew it. 1861 changed everything. The Civil War erupted, and American industry pivoted overnight. Fairbanks-Morse had been manufacturing scales for trade. Now, the nation needed scales for war, weighing munitions, measuring supplies, supporting a logistics machine that would determine the Union's survival. Fairbanks delivered. When the war ended, production resumed at peacetime scale. 4,000 units per month by 1868. 300 skilled mechanics working in Vermont. The company that started with Thaddeus and a hemp frustration now employed an army of craftsmen. But the real transformation was happening in the engine division. Windmills had been a stepping stone, pumping water, powering farms, simple mechanical work. Fairbanks-Morse wasn't interested in simple anymore. They wanted power, real power, the kind that could move a nation. 1906, gasoline rail cars. The company started building self-propelled rail vehicles. Small at first, experimental, but the diesel revolution was coming, and Fairbanks-Morse would be ready for it. Then came World War II. The U.S. Navy needed diesel engines, reliable, powerful, built to run under combat conditions in the Pacific and Atlantic theaters. Fairbanks-Morse shifted production again. Massive opposed-piston diesel engines, submarine power plants, marine propulsion systems that could take a hit and keep running. From measuring goods to powering a war effort, the company had become a cornerstone of American industrial might. 1937, Fairbanks-Morse purchased a building at 600 South Michigan Avenue in Chicago. The move was symbolic. Chicago was America's rail hub, its financial center, its beating industrial heart, and Fairbanks-Morse planted its headquarters there. The building itself told the story. Critics called diesel engines dirty diesels compared to the romance of steam. But Fairbanks-Morse saw progression. Wood gave way to coal. Coal gave way to diesel. And diesel was the future. By the 1960s, Fairbanks-Morse had become synonymous with diesel locomotives. The engines roared across America's freight lines. Passenger services, military transport. If it moved on rails and burned diesel, there was a good chance Fairbanks-Morse built the heart inside it. The giant had reached its peak. But peaks, they don't last forever. 1945, the war ended. Fairbanks-Morse had military contracts, diesel engines and destroyers and submarines. A reputation for reliability under fire, naturally, they wanted to dominate the next frontier. Diesel locomotives. Steam was dying. Everyone knew it. The question wasn't if railroads would go diesel, but which manufacturer would own the transition. General Motors had electromotive division. General Electric was pushing hard. Alco had legacy rail credibility. And Fairbanks-Morse? They had opposed-piston diesels that delivered power no one else could match. But here's where the story gets complicated. Fairbanks-Morse locomotives were powerful, incredibly powerful. The opposed-piston design meant more displacement, more torque, more raw capability per ton of engine weight. On paper, dominant. In practice, a different story. Railroads didn't just want power, they wanted reliability, ease of maintenance, parts availability, service networks. A locomotive might run for decades across brutal terrain, through temperature extremes, with minimal downtime. Fairbanks-Morse engines were beasts, but they were also complex beasts. Winning the diesel locomotive market wasn't about building the most powerful engine, it was about building an ecosystem. EMD offered financing, training programs, standardized parts across their entire fleet. A railroad could buy an EMD locomotive in 1950 and still get parts for it in 1970. Fairbanks and Morse sold engines. EMD sold a system. Therefore, the market tilted. By the late 1950s, Fairbanks-Morse's share of new locomotive sales was shrinking. They'd entered the market strong, built incredible machines, but the operational realities of running a railroad at scale didn't favor complexity. They favored simplicity multiplied by logistics. 1963, the pivot. Fairbanks-Morse largely exited the locomotive business. Not a dramatic collapse, not a scandal, just a quiet recognition that the market had moved in a different direction. The company that once powered a world war and dreamed of owning America's rails pulled back. A once promising venture into diesel locomotives began to fade from the tracks. But this wasn't the end. Not even close. 1963 marked a turning point most people don't talk about. Fairbanks-Morse didn't vanish. They adapted. The locomotive dream died, yes, but the company that started with a platform scale had always been about more than one product, more than one market. Diversification had built the empire. Now diversification would save it. The Chicago headquarters at 600 South Michigan Avenue still stood, the building that symbolized industrial might, the transition from steam to diesel, the heart of American manufacturing. But the company inside was changing. Scales? Still manufactured, still sold globally. The original platform design that Thaddeus Fairbanks patented in 1831 was still moving goods across 6 continents. That foundation never went away. Engines? Absolutely. Just not for railroads. Marine engines? Industrial power plants. Pumps for agriculture and mining. Fairbanks-Morse pivoted from rail to everything else that needed reliable diesel power. The opposed-piston design that proved too complex for locomotives? Perfect for stationary applications where maintenance schedules were predictable. But the public perception shifted. When people thought Fairbanks-Morse, they remembered the locomotives, the massive diesels roaring through freight yards, the company that challenged EMD and lost. The name faded from casual conversation, became a footnote in railroad history books. Most people assumed Fairbanks-Morse died with their locomotive division. They were wrong. The company that once built scales and locomotives would find its future at sea. Fast forward to 2024, 2025, 2026. George Whittier returns as CEO of Fairbanks-Morse Defense, not Fairbanks-Morse and Company anymore, not the scales or the windmills or the rail cars, a focused entity, defense contractor, naval engines, submarine propulsion, destroyer power plants. The name survived. The opposed-piston diesel engine technology that couldn't win on rails? Thriving in the U.S. Navy's fleets, running quieter, more efficient, proven reliable in the same combat conditions that made them famous in World War II. And here's what George Whittier said in 2026. The Red Sea, Ukraine, the Pacific. Global maritime risks were escalating. American shipbuilding was struggling to keep pace with China. The Fujian carrier was running trials. The naval balance was shifting. And Fairbanks-Morse Defense? Busier than ever, supplying the engines that keep American naval power operational in an increasingly unstable world. The giant didn't fall, it transformed. Found a niche where complexity was an advantage, where military contracts valued long-term capability over short-term cost, where the Fairbanks name still meant something critical. So what's the real story of Fairbanks-Morse? It's not a rise and fall. It's a rise and a refocus. 1823. A Vermont ironworks and a hemp frustration. Thaddeus Fairbanks saw a problem nobody had solved. Built a platform scale that changed global commerce. E&T Fairbanks and Company incorporated 1833. Then Charles Hosmer Morse arrived. 17 years old. $50 a year. He turned a Vermont scale shop into a global industrial empire. Offices in China by 1846. Cuba by 1848. 1,000 employees by 1860. Windmills in the 1880s. Railcars by 1906. World War II brought the diesel engines. Submarines. Destroyers. Locomotives in the post-war boom. A Chicago headquarters that symbolized American industrial supremacy. But the locomotive market didn't bend to engineering excellence. It bent to logistics. EMD built a system. Fairbanks-Morse built an engine. By 1963, the rails belonged to someone else. Most companies would have collapsed. Fairbanks-Morse retooled. The scale business continued. The marine engines evolved. The opposed-piston diesels found their home in naval vessels where complexity was acceptable and reliability was non-negotiable. Today, Fairbanks-Morse Defense operates in a world Thaddeus Fairbanks never imagined. Supplying engines for a Navy facing threats from the Red Sea to the South China Sea, George Whittier at the helm. The same engineering DNA that powered World War II, still powering American defense in 2026. A company that began with a simple scale, survived a century of industrial transformation by never betting everything on one product. Diversification built the empire. Adaptation kept it alive. And the name? Still here. Fairbanks-Morse didn't fall. It evolved. From weighing hemp bales in Vermont to powering destroyers in contested waters. That's not a story of collapse, that's a story of resilience. So the next time someone asks what happened to the great American industrial giants, remember this: some of them didn't disappear, they just found new battles to fight, new engines to build, new ways to prove that a good idea in 1831 can still matter 200 years later.